Hello, everybody. It's Guy Raz here, and I am so excited to welcome you to our first ever How I Built This webinar. Joining me today, you can see her in the screen either below or next to me, is Joanna Bloor. And if you've ever struggled with a question, at a party, like what do you do? Well, Joanna is here to help us with that. So welcome, Joanna. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. We are super excited to be presenting this webinar and others that we'll do as an extension of the How I Built This Summit, the skills track of the summit. It's sponsored by GoToMeeting. The summit, unfortunately, is now sold out. But for those of you who have registered with this webinar, you put your name into a drawing to get a free ticket. And guess what I have? I've got an envelope with the names of those two winners, which I will read at the end of this webinar. Two of you will be going to the summit for free, so stick with us. And just one more thing, if a question pops into your head during my conversation with Joanna, please feel free to type that question into the question box on your GoToWebinar, and then we'll get to some of those questions later on. All right, so let's get started. You ready, Joanna?
I'm ready to go.
All right. So, okay, the title of our webinar is very lofty. It's let me look at the official title. It's Crafting Your Personal Value Proposition, which sounds very impressive. So what does that actually mean?
Sure. Well, so, you think about that, the concept of a value proposition, and also this whole idea of how do you answer the question, what do you do? And then specifically for your listeners, the fact that they are going to the How I Built This conference or going to any conference, and that's the number one question you get asked at a conference is, what do you
What do you
do?
do?
And unless you have a really cool answer, and this was a true story, like I found a new dinosaur,
Yeah.
most of our answers are kind of boring. And you think about that interaction when you first meet somebody, and it's almost like your audio first impression. It's how we connect with each other and how we tell our story. And I have a bit of a theory that how we do it today is doesn't really tell the story of who you are, and
Yeah.
frankly why you're amazing and why somebody would want to connect with you and then carry on a conversation, and goodness only knows what might happen after that.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit of a sort of a scary question, right? Like it sort of forces people to kind of give an answer that doesn't, as you say, doesn't fully kind of represent who they are.
Right. Well, and like socially, we're all taught that it's really impolite to brag.
Yeah.
It's really rude to come out and go, I am amazing.
Yeah,
And
right.
and how do you do that without sounding, a bit douchey when you're doing it? And
Yeah.
then I think for entrepreneurs as well, there's that second struggle of not only are they saying who they are, but they're trying to really quickly get a bit of an insight into what does their company do? Because when you are the founder or the CEO of a company, you live, breathe, eat, sleep, everything, your company, and that's the first thing that comes out. And you think about, whether you are the CEO or even part of the team, when we connect with somebody, you buy the person first, you connect with the
Yeah.
person first, and then the company. And so, how do you craft that sentence so that somebody really gets a clear snippet of who you are and why you might be interesting to them, and then have a conversation on from there?
So, Joanna, one of the things you do is you help corporate leaders and other people kind of answer this question, what do you do? So let me start by asking you this question, Joanna Bloor, what do you do?
Well, I believe that every decision made about you and your opportunities is made in a room that you're not in, which begs two questions. One, are you part of the consideration set? Do they even know you exist? And two, what are they saying about you in that room? And really, my big question is, can you do anything about it? And I believe you can. So I help people figure out what to do about it as an introduction expert, and do that today at conferences and for individuals.
So what do you do?
Well, I do makeovers on how do you answer the question, what do you do, is the big answer. But what I just did is use my formula on how to do that differently. Because
Ah,
how I broke that down was actually talk first about why would you care rather than what exactly I do.
got it. Okay.
I'm really known for giving intro makeovers though. That's my favorite thing to do, is actually teach, have people come up to me at conferences, I do this on stage live, I do this over the phone with clients all the time, is ask them a bunch of questions and then come up with a better answer than their usual one on how do you answer the question, what do you do?
Got it. Okay. So do you want to
You want
try
to
it
do
on
it?
me? Yeah, let me try it. Okay, let me try it.
I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to give it a go. Okay, so my first question is always, because I have to understand, and I realize we all kind of know listening what you actually do, but I want you to kind of go into pretend world for a second. You're out
Sure.
there in the big wide
Out
world,
there in the world. Yep.
and somebody comes up to you and goes, oh, and sees your name badge and goes, oh, hey, guy, it's nice to meet you. What do you do? What do you say today?
Well, of course, it depends on the context, which I will explain in a moment. But generally, what I say is I make radio programs that are designed to give listeners a sense of possibility, that are consciously optimistic. That's what I do.
Well, so that's actually a lovely introduction because most of us, when I ask that question, do the I am X title at X
Yeah,
company.
right.
That's the usual answer. You actually were a little bit more intriguing because you talked about this concept of possibility, which really starts to tap into the why would the other person care? Because I'm going to go, well, what do you mean by possibility from
Right.
that? The only tweak I will do to that is we as human beings, when people ask us what do we do, tend to what we call in the product world feature dump. So we talk about ourselves and what do we do. And
Yeah.
if you think about what's actually happening in this interaction, is we're in essence saying, I want to say hello to you, and what is your time worth to me? And are you interesting? And do I want to have a further conversation with you? It sounds like when I break it down and actually talk about it out loud, I go, wow, we're in essence buying and selling each other's time, which feels a little icky when you first think about it and say, well, are you then trying to pull one over on me? But one of my core beliefs is that the more authentic you are and real you are about it, the easier it is to connect and the more likely you are to connect in the future. And so when you think about that and think about the fact that you're selling yourself, is I say, okay, well, then you need to think about yourself almost like a product.
Huh.
And anybody who has sold a product will tell you that you do not come out and in essence feature dump. You come out and you talk about why would that product matter to you. You don't talk about all of its features. And advertising has taught us that for years, that you actually talk about an emotion or a feeling or something like that up front. Like if I say Nike, for instance, what do you say?
I say awesome shoes.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
have like, and lots of people would say something like just do it, or right now,
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick or something like that. There's a
Right.
bit of a story and an emotion that happens
Yeah.
first. And so with that, you almost need to say the first sentence needs to be, why would somebody else care? So I'm going to now ask you a couple of questions so I can do
Sure.
your makeover on your
Okay.
um,
Let's do it.
finding
Let's make it
possibility.
over.
Okay, so talk to me about this possibilities idea because it's intriguing. Um, why is it you do that? What's important to you about that?
The most important thing to me is that people have a limited amount of time during the day. Let's say 14 waking hours, right? And during those 14 waking hours, most of the time is spent at work. And so there are probably 2 hours in the day when the average person commutes or has alone time, whether it's cooking or running, exercising, whatever that might be. And I'm asking you for one of those hours, and I'm asking a lot. That's a lot. So in order for me to win over that hour of your time, I feel like I need to give you something that is going to sort of let you soar after that. That's going to give you a sense of possibility. And that's why I make or I try to make shows that do that.
Okay. Oh, you're going to put me on the spot now because I'm going to
Uh-huh.
take everything you just said and recraft it into, we talked at the beginning about your human value statement, which is in essence, why would somebody else care about what you said? And everything that
Right.
you just said actually tells me a lot more about who you are and what it is you're trying to do than just I create moments of possibility for people. You could say something like, the reality is for people, is that they're lucky if they have maybe 1 or 2 hours of alone time.
Yeah.
And in that alone time, what better use of time could there be than
Right.
actually creating a moment of possibility? And so I create moments of possibility using podcasting and the radio as part of the team as at How I Built This or the TED Radio Hour, or you could even just have whatever. I just create moments of possibility through audio.
Cool. I like that. That's really cool. So here's the thing. You know, and I struggle with this because in places like Washington, D.C. or New York City, oftentimes the first question you're asked in a social gathering, not even a networking event, but any kind of gathering is, what do you do? But
Hmm.
then there are places in the US and certainly around the world where people almost consciously don't ask that. Like if you go to San Francisco or to Portland, people don't ask you that. They, they'll deliberately say, yeah, so what things do you like to do, or do you have any kids, or and I'm torn because on the one hand, what you do is a big part of your identity. Like what I do is these shows, but oftentimes if I meet somebody for the first time, I'll say I'm a dad. I've got two
Hmm.
kids and I'm a dad. Like that's the thing that's a big, obviously central to my identity. So I don't know, what do you think about that? About this idea that maybe that question, I don't know, sometimes it does feel transactional.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. Is one of them, and this again comes back to the core of while your answer to any sort of first interaction question is about you, it's not about you. It's about the other person. And so when you're thinking about that, there's always, and you said this at the beginning, there's always context about who is the audience that you're talking to.
Right.
And so, I went to a high school reunion recently, very interesting experience. And I
Ah,
really thought very carefully about how I was going to answer the question, what do I do? Because, you think about, I was sitting here going, gosh, the dynamic of a high school reunion, while amazing to see all of your friends, is also this weird sort of
totally.
social competition that happens. And I was like, gosh, I don't really want to come out with anything too strong because it's not about me and it's about them. And so really thinking about how you answer that question often changes depending on who you're talking to. I have, as an example, about 10 different versions depending on who's the audience I'm standing in front of, what is the context, time of day, and sometimes even why I want to connect with the other person. It's really understanding your audience first. And then on the why do we sometimes not ask that question, what do you do? I think it actually validates this whole idea that really when somebody says, you know what do you think is interesting in the world today,
Yeah.
or one of those kind of non what do you do questions, they're really just saying to you, I'm curious about you and who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do the how do you do thing because the answers are boring and don't
Yeah.
actually tell
Yeah.
me anything about you. And so,
Right.
especially when you go to something like a conference, like you are going there to connect with people and you're going there potentially to find employees, you're going there to get new ideas or partners. And if you take too much time to get into the like, how can we actually collaborate, which
Yeah.
is this amazing human ability that we have, then I think you're wasting a bit of time there.
All right. So I'm going to do something on this internationally broadcast go to meeting webinar, and I'm going to quickly just be authentic and transparent and tell you I've got a slight cold, so just bear with me. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. I mean, I'm a podcast host. I'm usually not on camera, so I could just kind of do this. All right, I'm back. Let's say I sell, enterprise software for, GoToWebinar or for
Mhm.
Salesforce or something, and you say, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, I sell enterprise software. How do you? How can you help me?
Sure. Well, so I mean, as you're right, most people say I sell enterprise software for, let's just say, Salesforce.com. I would hope that the enterprise sales team wouldn't do that. But so the first question I ask everybody when I'm trying to do a makeover is, in that process of selling enterprise software,
Right.
what is it you are uniquely good at? I actually have a conversation, because I absolutely believe that, there are, oh gosh, I can't even imagine, there's probably several thousand enterprise salespeople at Salesforce as an example.
Yeah.
And every single one of them is a little bit different. I actually think the millennials have this 100% right. We are all special snowflakes. And in your style and in your approach, there's something unique about what you do. And so I will start asking questions about that. So everything from, what were they really good at when they were, 8 years old? I think who we are and what we were great at then quite frequently manifests into our adult working world. I'll ask them, what others might say about them.
Yeah.
I'll say, gosh, if I walked down the hallways of Salesforce and asked a bunch of people, what are you known for? What do you think they would say? Now, the tricky bit is most people will come in and say, well, I'm really strategic, or I'm really good at connecting people, or I'm really good at getting things done, which are perfectly fine answers, but they're also like, I can imagine if we ask the audience right now, how many of you would put your hand up at one of those
Right.
three things? Basically, everybody would. And that's not very unique. And so I'll ask them maybe about what is their philosophy towards sales, or what do they believe is the future of selling enterprise software, and really get to know how they think. Because that's the other thing that you're doing when you answer that question, or when you talk about yourself, is you're actually teaching somebody else how you think, as opposed to what have you done in the past. You're actually talking about the future, and you think about why you are hired, why somebody invests in you, why somebody comes to work for you, all of those reasons why you're put on a project. It's because of your ability to do something in the future and your ability to solve future problems, rather than everything you've done in your past, which
Right.
that, like, what do you do thing. And so if I can find the unique philosophy or unique approach or something that is truly them, then you then take that idea and say, well, okay, that thing that is amazing about you and is unique about you, what problem does that solve for your potential customer or audience or whoever it is you're talking to? And then you actually create the sentence as a problem solution sentence. So in your case, when I gave the very fast, like, what do you do?
Yeah.
First sentence was actually talking about the problem, which was that most people have very little time. And the
Right.
solution is, how do you make that time the most valuable? And that what you do is you make time valuable for people by creating hope and possibility in their thinking and help them soar. And you think about, so if you are the listener version of that, you hear that statement and you go, I have that problem. I want that solution. I want you.
Hmm.
And that is about as simple as it gets. And how do you craft your own value proposition statement? But the
Yeah.
key is really to, I think I look at uniqueness as a biggie, because nobody wants to be boring.
No.
Yeah, authenticity, super important, because we've got a very high bar as human beings for kind of smelling out something that's not quite authentic. And if you're talking about yourself, like, this is the product that you should actually really think about, like, who am I and what is my gift to the world? And
Hmm.
then the last piece is compelling. So again, thinking about, why would somebody else care that the thing that I do best in the world is actually important to their world? And
Yeah.
it has amazing impacts, because again, for the people going to a conference, it's a really quick way of saying, gosh, there's an opportunity to collaborate here.
Yeah.
Or you think about, especially in the United States today, we see stories all the time of employees saying to executives, you don't manifest my values and I don't believe in you, and therefore leaving the company, even though the company might be an amazing product.
Hmm.
We live in a world where people work for human beings just as much as they work for a brilliant idea. And it's the combination, I think it's the combination of both that really make a big difference. So while I talk about this very simple concept of how do you answer the question, what do you do? I have a belief that not only does it help you when you go to a conference to find people to partner with, but it literally means that some employee will say, I want to go work for you because I'm inspired by this leader. So within an organization, that question becomes really important. And then you think about why somebody does work for you. Like if I asked you to think about your favorite boss on the planet, like the person who, if the phone rang today, it's probably a bit of a stretch for you, you'd be like, oh, I should at least have a conversation.
Yeah.
We all have that person. The reason they're generally our favorite boss is because they saw us for who we exactly were and what our unique, authentic, compelling value was, and usually pushed us um, beyond what we thought we were capable for. And so not only as an individual should you understand how do you answer the question, what do you do, but if you do that for the people on your team, you're basically telling your team, even if they may all have the same job,
Yeah.
for instance, that their unique contribution matters, and everybody wants to work for that kind of a person.
Yeah. And by the way, Joanna, if my boss, who I think may be watching, you're my favorite boss ever. So before we get to questions, just very briefly, I mean, it sounds like it's not about what is your title. It's
Hmm.
what are the things that you do? Give me a sense of how your mind works, because
Hmm.
you may ask somebody, I mean, the chances are you're going to ask somebody that question at a conference, and what they do doesn't necessarily dovetail with what you do. I mean, it's a game of chance, right? And so
Yeah.
from a transactional perspective, it may not bear fruit, but you could still have an interesting conversation, or it may bear fruit if you start to kind of hear about how that person thinks
Yeah.
about solving problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also take it a step further that it's not just about can you connect with that person, but
Yeah.
if you have a really unique way of, like, if you are known for something and you have a unique way of thinking about something that's really easy for somebody to understand. Like I talked about earlier, that when you answer that question, you're in essence teaching the other person. You think about, like, conferences are amazing because you'll be having a conversation. You can say, oh my God, I just had this amazing conversation with this guy over here who thinks about this other thing that you're thinking
Yeah.
about. You two should connect. And that's really where the magic of human beings and how we bring ideas together really starts. So it's not just you've now taught somebody else to take your story beyond just you.
Yeah. All right. We are, as we continue this GoToMeeting webinar, we're going to take some of your questions, and please stick around, because in this envelope, I have the names of 2 people who have registered for this webinar, who will be going to the How I Built the Summit for free on October 16th in San Francisco, and we'll have a chance to meet and chat there as well. And hopefully, I won't have a cold, at the summit. So. Let's get to the first question. This is from Amy Bacharach, or Bacharach. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Amy, so forgive me if I'm not. Amy's question is, many of us wear a lot of different hats, and we have many hats, equally important identities. So how do we prioritize what we talk about, especially if you don't necessarily know your audience, or if it's just a general audience?
That's a tough one. I mean, it does take a little bit of thought ahead of time and kind of thinking about, this is where I come back to the what are you good at when you were 8, and
Yeah,
having, like, what is your overarching statement about yourself? What is it, if you said it to kind of anybody in passing, what would you say about yourself, and how is that a solution to other
yeah,
people's ideas? So, in my life before I did coaching around how do you answer the question, what do you do? I used to run um, ad technology stacks for media companies, very
hmm,
sexy stuff. But what I knew, as an example, as when I was 8, I really understood, I could map read really well, and I really understand how to
ah,
visualize things in 3D, and got very practiced around it because of the strange life I was leading at the time. And when I would go in and interview for jobs, I'd actually talk about my ability to see process in 3D in my head, the same way you can see a map in your head and navigate through. And that allowed me to be really efficient with software development. So again, it's thinking about, like, what is that thing that's really different about you and how you tell that story. And my guess is our listener has something that is really special about them that they could share that just gets the conversation going. And if she's struggling with what that is, my best piece of advice is go find 5 people who know you and love you. And I say know you and love you professionally. Moms are amazing, but they generally don't actually have a good idea of what we do. At least my mother doesn't understand what I do for a living. She's very supportive, but she doesn't get it. But you go ask five people, like a mentor, a mentee is a really great person to ask, your peers, people from other offices that you've worked in, and say, I'll just ask them a very simple question, like, what am I known for? Or what 5 words would you use to describe me in the work that I do? And just getting that benchmark and that information will give you an idea of the story that's already being told about you in the room that you're not in. And then you can start there and start to figure out how you can create versions of that for all the various different situations.
Cool. All right, one more quick question and quick answer, and then we're gonna make this announcement, Joanna. We're gonna announce the winner. You know, we could have a dinner party through GoToMeeting. I could just like serve you some pasta. Would you like some
That would be
pasta?
lovely.
Yeah.
Will we going Alfredo or
It's
tomato
usually,
today?
you know, fork and knife. I mean, this is great. Okay, this is from Nana Afo Manin, and again, Nana, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it's a beautiful name. She says, you know, how do you deal with the honest fear that you know you're rambling on before you actually give your answer? Because a lot of times she says that she has this amazing answer, but then she tosses it away when the conversation starts.
Oh, oh, so there's this little character that sits on all of our shoulders,
Yes, yes, yeah.
that says, no, you can't say that. They will judge you, all of those sorts of
Yes,
things.
yeah,
I just tell people to tell them to go take a hike.
yeah.
Um, like, we're all a little bit afraid in that conversation. And so recognizing that there is that little voice, I think, is the first thing I would tell Nana to think about. The second thing is, like, human connection is where the magic happens, is what is really amazing about us as people. And um, you can throw away the opportunity to connect with somebody, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to borrow another 30 seconds of their time and see if there's an opportunity to connect. And I think, yeah, 30 seconds isn't that long and you should
Yeah.
go for it. So kind of balancing, like put me on your other shoulder going, you could do this. It's great. You can be fantastic.
Hi, Joanna.
And give it a try. Yeah. I mean, this is, I'm asking people to do something a little bit strange. I
Yeah.
totally get it. But I have seen over and over again, people take this idea and start to apply it immediately,
Hmm.
and like doors have opened and opportunities have started to happen, and just that conversation in themselves around this is why I matter has such a dramatic effect on how people react to you and how you then react to the world. And it's magic, and I want more people to do it.
All right, so Joanna, we can't get to any more questions. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Nana. We have many more questions. We can hopefully we'll get to some of those in our subsequent webinars. But right now, I've got this envelope. It's backwards. I got this envelope, and I've been told by our partners at Deloitte. I'm just kidding. I'm just doing an Oscars thing. I've been told that the winning names are in here, and they are the correct winning names. These two people, the names of these two people on this paper, registered for the webinar, and they were randomly chosen, and they will get to go to the How I Built This Summit in San Francisco on October 16th, our first ever one-day summit with some amazing folks that we've just lined up, and amazing skills track sessions, including one sponsored by GoToMeeting. The winners are, drum roll, Joanna, do you want to give me some kind of drum roll?
Did that work?
That was great. The winners are Tim Wilson, and that's with 2 L's. Tim, Willson. Tim Wilson is one winner, so Tim, congratulations. And Juanita Ortiz. Tim and Juanita, you are going to be going to the How I Built the Summit in San Francisco on October 16th for free. We will be in touch with you via email about how to claim your tickets. We are super excited to meet you. Come see me at the summit, and I will I'll get you a cup of coffee because there's going to be a lot of free coffee there. Thank you again to GoToMeeting for their sponsorship of this webinar. We're going to be doing more of them over the course of the next several weeks and months. If you want to find out more about this webinar, you can go to, or the summit, you can go to npr.org/summit. That's, let me double check, npr.org/summit. npr.org/summit. Joanna, thank you to you. And next time I will bring a dish of pasta and pass it through the screen to you.
Thank you so much, and
All
good
right.
luck to everybody. Go out, be awesome.
And thank you all for joining us. And I look forward to seeing some of you at the summit and connecting in other places on Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. And have a great day. Bye.
Support for How I Built This comes from GoToMeeting, the collaborative meeting platform that makes it easy to move work forward.